I accidentally discovered my sister and best friend's secret romance, and the fallout turned our lives upside down. I never thought I'd see something that would make my stomach drop so hard it felt like it had suddenly turned into a brick. I was just walking past the living room, my mind wandering, trying to distract myself from the long, exhausting day, when I froze in place. My sister, Emma, was sitting way too close to my best friend, Mark, on the couch. And it wasn't just the casual laughter of friends. There was this intensity, the kind you can't mistake even if you desperately wanted to. Their hands brushed repeatedly, fingers lingering longer than normal, her head tilted toward him just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. And Mark, his usual playful smirk had changed into something softer, more intimate. Like they were sharing some secret joke that had nothing to do with me. My heart started pounding like a drum in my chest. And for a moment, I couldn't even breathe properly. I blinked, hoping my eyes were deceiving me, that maybe I had just walked into some innocent moment and read too much into it. But no, the scene before me was undeniable. And then it hit me even harder when Emma glanced toward the kitchen as if checking if anyone else was watching. That look, so subtle but so loaded, told me this wasn't the first time. And it probably wouldn't be the last. That I backed away slowly, clutching the countertop for support, my mind spinning with a million thoughts at once. Should I confront her? Should I yell? Should I tell Mark to back off? Or just pretend I didn't see a thing? The problem was, every option seemed wrong. Pretending would feel like betrayal to myself. Speaking up could destroy not just my relationship with Emma, but also with Mark. The one person I thought I could trust implicitly. Every nerve in my body was screaming, and I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. Betrayal, shock, confusion, anger, and a bitter, sinking sadness that I didn't want to feel. How could Emma do this? And with Mark? My best friend? Someone I trusted more than anyone. My thoughts kept spiraling, and I could practically feel the tension radiating from them across the room. The living room suddenly seemed smaller, more suffocating. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the soft ticking of the wall clock, and even those mundane sounds were twisting in my mind into a backdrop for this nightmare. Every laugh they shared felt like a punch in the gut. Every little touch, every glance exchanged, etched itself into my memory like fire. That I retreated to the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to calm my racing heart. My hands were clammy, my mouth dry, and yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. There was a part of me that wanted to scream, to confront them right there and then. But another part, a quieter, scared part, whispered, "Just breathe. Don't make a scene. You need to think." I don't know how long I stayed like that, caught between horror and disbelief. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same. That I finally made it to my room, closing the door behind me with a soft click, but it didn't help. The scene I had just witnessed replayed over and over in my mind like a cruel, looping video. I sank onto my bed, burying my face in my hands, trying to will the image away, but it clung to me stubbornly. How could they? The question echoed relentlessly. Emma, my sister, my family. How could she betray me like this? And Mark, my best friend, someone I had confided in countless times, someone I thought I could trust with anything. I paced around the room, tugging at my hair in frustration. Am I overreacting? Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I misread it. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. My instincts rarely lied. And everything, the way they leaned, the way their eyes met, the little touches that seemed to linger longer than appropriate, was screaming that it was far from innocent. And then the guilt crept in. Should I tell someone? Mom? Dad? Or should I confront Emma directly? And Mark? Would he even care if I said something? My stomach churned at the thought of their reactions. I imagined Mom's face, wide-eyed, shaking her head in disbelief. Dad's silent, disappointed stare, and the chaos that would inevitably ripple through our circle of friends. I wasn't sure I could handle it. My mind jumped from one scenario to another, each more terrifying than the last. What if I say nothing? I'd be complicit in keeping their secret. What if I do speak up? Relationships could shatter beyond repair. I was caught between wanting justice, wanting to protect myself, and not wanting to ruin everyone's lives. That I flopped back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. The pale light from my window cast shadows across the room, making it feel like even the walls were judging me. My chest tightened as anger bubbled up. Anger at Emma for betraying my trust, anger at Mark for crossing the line, anger at myself for feeling powerless. And yet, beneath it all, a strange, gnawing fear. What if their actions went beyond just a fleeting affair? What if this was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would tear apart everything I loved? I picked up my phone, idly scrolling through messages, trying to distract myself, but every ping, every notification made my nerves jump. What if someone else already knew? What if I wasn't the first to see this? My thoughts were a tornado, spinning faster and faster, dragging me deeper into despair. And through it all, one thing remained painfully clear. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend I didn't see what I saw. But the question that haunted me the most was how I would face it, and if I was ready to handle the storm that was coming. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Every time I saw Emma laughing or texting on her phone, my heart skipped a beat. I found myself sneaking glances, trying to catch even the tiniest hint that it was still happening. It felt wrong, like I was spying, but I couldn't help it. My curiosity mixed with dread, and I hated myself for it. During lunch, I noticed Mark lingering near her, asking her questions that made her smile in that soft, almost shy way she never did around me. Their interactions were subtle but loaded. The brush of a hand on the back, the quick glance that lingered just a fraction too long. Each little detail was a confirmation, each tiny gesture a dagger in my gut that I started keeping track, almost compulsively. Notes in my phone, times, places, texts I overheard when Emma left her phone on the counter. My mind became a notebook of secrets I never wanted to know. And the more I collected, the more my anger grew. It wasn't just betrayal. It was intentional, a secret world built right under my nose. Every detail I noticed hurt more than the last. The way she bit her lip when he said something funny, the way his eyes softened when she laughed, the casual, almost familiar touch of her hand on his arm. I kept telling myself I needed proof, something undeniable, something I could point to when I confronted them. But even as I gathered these moments, I felt a growing storm inside me, a mix of hurt, rage, and disbelief that I tried to focus on my own life, throwing myself into schoolwork and social plans, but nothing helped. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be a message from either of them, something that would reveal more secrets. I even caught myself imagining confrontations, imagining the words I'd use, imagining the looks on their faces when they realized I knew everything. It was exhausting, and yet I couldn't stop. That night, lying in bed, I realized the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the uncertainty, the constant replaying of every interaction, every smile, every glance. My mind refused to rest. And through it all, a small, darker thought crept in. Maybe I should do something about it. Maybe I should make them pay for this. I couldn't stop thinking about what I should do next. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, my mind a mess of swirling thoughts. Do I confront her? Do I confront him? Do I tell someone else? Each option felt like stepping into a minefield. The thought of confronting Emma filled me with dread. Her reaction could be explosive, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the fallout. And Mark, I'd trusted him, confided in him, laughed with him, joked with him. To think he could betray me like this made my chest tighten, but the worst part wasn't even their betrayal. It was the way it made me question everything I thought I knew about them. Was Emma always like this? Did Mark really care about me, or had I been blind all along? I felt this gnawing unease, a feeling that maybe my whole circle of friends and family was built on illusions that I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe it was just a harmless flirtation. But deep down, I knew better. The way they looked at each other, the little touches, the secret smiles, they were intimate, deliberate. I couldn't pretend it was innocent, no matter how much I wanted to. Anger started to mix with my fear, bubbling up in a way that made me almost shake. I could picture a confrontation, carefully planned, where I would reveal everything I knew and make them face the consequences. But then guilt would sneak in. Was it fair to punish them? Was I overreacting? Or was it right to hold them accountable for the deception? I realized I was at a crossroads. I could act impulsively, let my emotions drive me, and potentially ruin relationships forever. Or I could bide my time, gather more information, and make sure my actions were precise, calculated. The second option terrified me almost as much as the first. Waiting meant living with the knowledge, seeing them laugh together, watching their secret world continue without me. But acting too soon could destroy everything irreparably. And then, just as exhaustion began to drag me down, a small, dark thought crept into my mind. Maybe this isn't just about betrayal. Maybe it's about balance. About making them see what it feels like. I pushed it away immediately, ashamed of even thinking it. But the fact it came at all told me something. I was already consumed by this, and I had no idea how much longer I could stand being on the sidelines. The next morning, I couldn't even focus on breakfast. Every time I glanced toward the living room, I caught them sharing those subtle gestures again. Emma leaning just a little too close, Mark's hand brushing against hers. The way their laughter blended in a way that felt private, almost conspiratorial. My coffee had gone cold because I couldn't tear my eyes away, even though I told myself repeatedly that I shouldn't watch, that it was none of my business. That I noticed the small things that made my stomach churn. Emma's hair fell differently when she smiled at him. Her eyes sparkled in a way they never did with anyone else. Mark's voice was softer, gentler, and the jokes he made to her were different, more intimate. Every look they shared seemed loaded, like an unspoken language that I was only now beginning to decode. When Emma left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, I couldn't resist. Just a glance at her messages confirmed my worst fears. Flirtatious emojis, lingering chats late at night, small notes that suggested meetings I hadn't known about. I felt like I was intruding, like a voyeur, but I couldn't stop. The more I saw, the more my anger and betrayal grew. Mingled with this overwhelming sense of helplessness, I started timing their interactions, noting the small patterns. They would meet in the backyard when they thought I was busy in my room, or linger in the hallway just long enough for no one else to notice. It was meticulous, like a carefully rehearsed dance I was only now catching on to. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I unknowingly swallowed? And why? Why had I never noticed before? By the end of the day, I was exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained. Every glance, every touch, every secret smile was a punch to the gut. I felt like I was losing a part of my family, my friends, and even my own sense of reality. And yet, I couldn't look away. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to demand answers and explanations. Another part, darker and quieter, thought about revenge, about making them feel even a fraction of the betrayal and pain I was experiencing. The storm inside me wasn't slowing down. It was building, tightening around my chest, and I knew I couldn't stay on the sidelines much longer. Something had to give. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed proof, something undeniable, something concrete I could hold on to when the time came. I started watching them more closely, not just their gestures, but the tiny, subtle clues that confirmed everything I already feared. The way Emma's phone would light up in the middle of dinner, the way she'd hide it in her lap when I passed by. The quick, almost imperceptible exchange of glances with Mark when they thought no one was watching. I began keeping mental notes, cataloging every suspicious moment. I even considered writing it down, making a timeline of their interactions. Every late-night message, every secretive meeting, every fleeting touch became evidence in my mind. The more I collected, the heavier the weight in my chest grew. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a carefully hidden, ongoing deceit, and I had no idea how long it had been happening. And yet, part of me hesitated. I knew that confronting them recklessly could backfire. Emma might lash out, Mark might deny everything, and suddenly, I'd be the villain in a story I didn't want to star in. But staying silent, letting it continue, felt like a slow torture. I couldn't trust myself to simply watch while my world quietly collapsed around me. So, I made a plan, not an aggressive one, not yet, but a careful, calculated approach. I would observe, gather undeniable proof, and prepare for the confrontation. I needed to be sure, to remove any doubt from their denials. I imagined sitting them both down, laying everything out with cold precision, watching their faces twist with guilt or shock. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, part fear, part satisfaction. As I lay in bed that night, thinking through the plan, I realized that the stakes were higher than I had imagined. This wasn't just about Emma and Mark anymore. It was about trust, about betrayal, about the fragile bonds of family and friendship. And I knew, deep down, that once this confrontation happened, nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days became a careful balancing act. I went about my normal routines, pretending everything was fine, but my eyes were constantly scanning for the tiniest slip-ups. Every interaction between Emma and Mark felt loaded with meaning. The way she laughed at something he said in passing. The way he rested a hand on her shoulder. Small, seemingly insignificant moments that I cataloged obsessively in my mind, that I started documenting everything discreetly. Notes in my phone, subtle mental timestamps, observations about where they met, what they said, even the tone of their voices. I knew I couldn't confront them without undeniable proof. I needed facts, not just gut feelings. And gathering those facts made every glance and every word feel like a trap waiting to spring. Watching them interact around others added another layer of complexity. Friends laughed, oblivious to the tension brewing beneath the surface, and it drove me insane. The casual touches and secret smiles they shared when nobody else was looking made my chest tighten. I felt like I was watching a private world unfold, one I wasn't supposed to see, but couldn't look away from at the same time. I noticed small cracks in their composure. Emma would occasionally look around, as if checking that no one else had noticed her behavior. Mark's casual joking sometimes faltered when she glanced his way. These tiny moments were fuel for my determination. They were hiding something, and I was going to uncover every bit of it by the end of the week. I was emotionally exhausted. Every casual conversation with Emma or Mark carried a hidden tension I couldn't ignore. I felt like a tightrope walker, balancing between patience and the urge to explode, between collecting proof and wanting to confront them immediately. The storm inside me wasn't slowing down. It was gaining strength, and I knew the next step would either bring relief or chaos by the end of the week. I realized I couldn't wait any longer. The tension had built up too much, like a pressure cooker about to explode. I needed a plan, a strategy, not just a rush of anger or impulse. Sitting on my bed, I went over every possible scenario, weighing the risks and consequences that I imagined confronting Emma first, alone, demanding explanations, trying to read her reactions. But what if she denied everything? What if she twisted the story, turned it against me? And Mark, how would he react? Would he admit it, deflect, or play innocent like nothing was happening? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't afford mistakes that I started listing my options. 1. Confront them separately, gather their reactions. 2. Gather more evidence first. Make sure my case was airtight. 3. Let someone else unknowingly walk into the situation and expose them. But that felt cowardly, and I couldn't trust anyone else to handle it without it spiraling out of control. Every thought seemed to pull me in a different direction. Anger warred with caution. Desire for justice clashed with fear of consequences. My chest felt tight, my mind a whirlwind of what-ifs. I realized this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about control, about making sure that the people who had deceived me understood the full weight of their actions. And then, almost against my will, a darker thought emerged. Maybe they need to feel the shock, the panic, the confusion I felt. I shook my head violently, ashamed even to consider it, but I couldn't deny the temptation. The idea of confronting them with precision, showing them that their little secret wasn't so hidden, that their deception had consequences. It was almost intoxicating that I sat back, exhaling shakily, knowing one thing for sure. The confrontation wasn't going to be easy, and the fallout was going to be massive. My life, our family, our friendships, everything hung in the balance. And yet, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I had a plan forming, and for the first time in days, I felt a tiny, fierce spark of control. The next few days became a delicate dance. I couldn't rush anything, but I also couldn't stay passive. Every interaction between Emma and Mark now felt like a test, a chance to observe, to gather more details, to watch for slips that would make my case undeniable. I began strategically positioning myself, timing when they met, noting the subtle gestures that betrayed their secret. A hand on a shoulder, a lingering glance, a shared joke that seemed far too intimate for public view. All of it was meticulously recorded in my mind and, when I could, on my phone. I was careful not to let them suspect that I knew, careful to keep my own reactions neutral, almost detached. Watching them around our friends was even worse. Everyone else was oblivious, laughing, joking, sharing casual moments that only emphasized the tension I carried inside. The ease with which they concealed their secret, The way they interacted in public made my blood boil. And yet, the thought of confronting them prematurely terrified me. I needed the proof, every little piece, before I could act without giving them a chance to deflect or at night. I replayed every scene in my mind, imagining the confrontation, analyzing every potential outcome. Would Emma cry, lash out, or become defensive? Would Mark own up or twist the situation to make me look like the irrational one? I went over each scenario repeatedly, weighing my words, my tone, even my body language. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about making them understand the weight of their betrayal. And through it all, a small, dark satisfaction began to creep in. The thought of them squirming, of facing the consequences of their actions, sent a thrill through me that I couldn't deny. I hated myself a little for feeling it, but it was there, undeniable. I was on the edge of something monumental, something that would change everything by the end of the week. I felt both exhausted and ready. I had the observations, the evidence, and the plan. All that was left now was the confrontation, and I knew that once it began, there would be no turning back. The moment finally came without warning. I had been waiting for the right time, but somehow, it chose me. I walked into the living room just as Emma and Mark were laughing together, a subtle familiarity in their gestures that made my chest tighten. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Can I ask you both something?" They froze instantly. The laughter died midair, and I saw that fleeting panic in their eyes. My heart was hammering, but I forced myself to stay calm, to project control. Emma looked at me, a mixture of confusion and suspicion on her face. Sure. What is it?" I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my gaze sink in. "I know what's been going on. All of it. Every little secret, every late-night text, every meeting you thought I didn't notice." For a split second, neither of them moved or spoke. And then it began, the subtle shifting, the nervous glance exchanges, the guilty twitch of a hand. Emma's eyes widened, Mark's smirk faltered, and the air between us thickened with tension so dense I could practically feel it pressing against my chest. I don't know what you mean," Emma stammered. But her voice wavered, betraying her composure. Mark's jaw tightened, and he opened his mouth, then closed it again. The dance of lies was collapsing before my very eyes, and I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow that I continued, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "Don't bother denying it. I've seen everything. And now, it's time we all face the consequences of these choices." The room felt smaller, hotter, every second stretching into eternity. Friends might have laughed off a casual confrontation, but this was a reckoning, a collision of truth and betrayal. And in that moment, I realized something else. This was only the beginning. The fallout, the reactions, the emotional chaos. It was about to consume us all. The silence that followed my words was suffocating. Emma's lips trembled, and her eyes glistened with a mix of guilt and fear. Mark's hands fidgeted nervously, avoiding my gaze. The tension in the room was so thick I could practically taste it. I didn't think you'd see," Emma whispered finally, her voice barely audible. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by vulnerability I had never seen before. Mark's attempt at a casual shrug fell flat. "It's complicated," he muttered, but the words sounded empty, even to him. That I sank into a chair, trying to steady my racing heart. "Complicated? You've been lying to everyone I care about. Every friend, every conversation, everything you've shared has been built on deceit. How is that just complicated?" Emma's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands. The laughter, the lighthearted teasing, all of it vanished, replaced by raw shame. Mark finally looked at me, eyes wide, as if seeing me for the first time. "We didn't mean for it to get this far," he said, but there was no way to erase the tension that had already shattered our world. I felt a wave of conflicting emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, but also a strange, cold sense of control. I had confronted them. I had made them see that I knew everything. And now, the aftermath was out of my hands. Friends who had been around earlier sensed the shift immediately. Questions were asked, whispers spread, and the atmosphere thickened with uncertainty. Emma and Mark tried to explain, to mitigate the damage, but the truth was out. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Some things couldn't be undone. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing, and ours had shattered beyond repair. Yes, I left the room for a moment, my chest still tight. I couldn't stop the mental replay of every interaction, every betrayal. The chaos was only beginning, and the ripple effect of their actions, and my confrontation, would be felt by everyone we knew. That I retreated to my room, closing the door behind me like a shield against the storm I had just unleashed. My heart was still racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but now it was mingled with an ache I hadn't anticipated. Seeing Emma and Mark confronted, seeing the guilt on their faces, it was satisfying in a cold way, but it also left a hollow pit in my chest. I sank onto my bed and buried my face in my hands. The anger I had carried for days felt exhausted, replaced by a tangled mess of sadness, disappointment, and lingering betrayal. How could people I trusted so completely, people I loved, build secret worlds behind my back? The thought alone made my stomach twist. I replayed every moment, every secret glance, every whispered message, every touch I had noticed. The betrayal was real, the evidence undeniable. But the consequences? The consequences were more than I had imagined. Relationships strained, friendships tested, family trust shaken to its core. And I was at the center of it all, the one who had seen, known, and finally acted. That a part of me wanted to retreat from everyone, to isolate myself until the storm passed. Another part, smaller but insistent, whispered that I couldn't run. I had done what I had to do. I had confronted them. Now it was time to let the fallout play out, to watch how everyone navigated the chaos they had created and the truths that could no longer be hidden. And even amidst the turmoil, I realized something vital. I couldn't control their actions or their feelings, but I could control how I responded, how I carried myself through this upheaval. I was the one left standing in the aftermath, and I had the chance to rebuild, to learn, and to decide what relationships were truly worth keeping. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. The echoes of betrayal, the tension, and the shattered trust lingered. Yet somewhere in that quiet, a fragile sense of clarity emerged. I had faced the truth, however painful, and I was still here, still breathing, still thinking. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward moving forward. Days passed, and the tension slowly began to settle, though the damage was undeniable. Emma avoided my gaze, and Mark's usual confidence had crumbled into awkwardness whenever I was around. Their secret world had collapsed, leaving behind an aftermath none of us could ignore. That I spent a lot of time reflecting, lying awake at night replaying every detail. The anger had dulled into a sharp ache of disappointment. I realized the betrayal wasn't just about Emma and Mark. It was about trust, about boundaries, and about the fragility of relationships when honesty is absent. Yet, despite the chaos, there was a strange sense of liberation. I had confronted the truth. I had faced the deceit directly, and I had not let it control me. The emotional storm was still there, yes, but somewhere beneath the hurt and shock, I could feel clarity beginning to take root. I knew now which relationships I could repair and which ones I needed to distance myself from. The hardest part was accepting that nothing would ever be exactly the same. Family gatherings, casual conversations, even ordinary moments, all had changed. But through the pain, I found a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. I had survived the shock, confronted the betrayal, and held on to myself in the process. And as I looked ahead, I realized that while some bridges might be burned, others could be rebuilt, stronger, more honest, and more aware of the fragile threads that connect us. Betrayal had left its mark, but it had also taught me something invaluable: the power of awareness, courage, and the resilience to face even the most painful truths.